Welcome everybody to this edition of Tackle Box Talks. Today we're on location at Roaring River Fish Hatchery in Sia, Oregon. I'm Daniel Kittleson from Washington County Parks, alongside Tyler with ODFW, the Fish Hatchery manager here. And of course, our favorite host of the show of Tackle Box Talks, Mark Davis.
It's a long ways down here. It's a heck of a drive. Beautiful area. Great facility. Can you show us around and introduce us to the fish?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go do it.
All right.
Let's go.
So where are we heading, Tyler? What's over here?
We'll go to the hatch house. That's where all the eggs and fry are kept before they get moved outside here.
Is this where they spawn them?
So we actually spawn down there, but the fertilization happens in here.
Okay. All right.
We do a delayed fertilization.
All right. What do we got here, Tyler?
So this is the hatch house. This is where all the eggs and the fry are kept. Here's some eggs in the incubator. These are the eyed egg stage. They're getting fairly close. They'll probably hatch in about a week or so.
If you look very carefully, you can actually see the hive.
Yeah, you can. They're at this stage. They're still pretty durable.
Now, how long till those hatch out, Tyler?
So, this is a little bit unique right here. This is actually chilled water, so it's quite cold. We're actually slowing down the growth on these eggs because we're trying to catch up some other eggs. So probably about 2 weeks on these. But this water is about 39 degrees. It's quite cold.
Now, one of the reasons you have to chill them is to retard their growth. Right?
Yeah, we're slowing down the growth on these eggs.
But do you? The reason you do that is so when you mix the smaller ones and the bigger ones that hatch out first, doesn't somebody have a bad habit of getting eaten?
Yeah, so we wouldn't actually mix two different sizes. What we're doing is they're trapping these steelhead on the Siuslaw over a long period of time. So we're getting eggs over a few month period. So we have the early eggs we have to slow them down, and the later eggs we have to speed them up. So over here we're speeding some eggs up that are trying to catch up to these guys, and then we'll try and put them in these ponds all at the same time. That way they don't pick on each other.
That's good.
Yeah.
You don't want them eating each other.
No. And then here's some that have just recently hatched out. These are alevins or sac fry. So they actually, from the time we fertilize the egg to the time they come out of the incubators, takes about two to 3 months here at Roaring River Hatchery, because our water temperatures are fairly cold.
Now, do you chill your water?
So we don't have any control over the river water coming in here, but we have a chiller, and we do have some heated water. But all the other water outside and all these are just ambient river temperature. We can't control the temperature of that.
How long ago did these hatch?
They've been hatched for about 1 week. Yeah, so they're like a week old, I guess you'd say.
Okay. And then, Bill, that's called the alvin stage?
Yeah, alvin, or we call them sac fry sometimes.
Okay.
We also call the fish that go into the troughs fry as well.
Now, do they go from the trays into the tank?
Yeah, so we keep them in here. We track their growth. Every day we record the water temperature twice a day, and we're tracking their growth through a program called temperature units. And once their yolk sac is absorbed, then we put them in here, and then we monitor them, and once their yolk sac is completely absorbed, then they're ready for a little bit of feed.
What percentage of the eggs successfully hatch out?
It kind of depends on the stock and the individual egg group, but once we put them in here, we only expect to lose probably about 3 to 5% from from the time we put them in here to the time we first feed them.
And then do you have to typically pick out the mortalities?
Yeah, so we clean up all the eggs before we put them in here, and then we go through these at least once a week, sometimes more than that. And we pick out any mortality that's in the incubator because it can create fungus in there. So we want to keep them nice and clean.
Normally after they hatch out, it takes them how long to absorb that yolk sac?
So it still takes about, it depends on water temperature again, but close to a month. So they'll spend about a month or so at that stage you see there where they're slowly developing and absorbing their yolk sac.
The recipe for the food that you provide them, I know when you go to the hatchery, you can buy for a quarter
Sure.
a handful of the sprout butter.
Yeah.
They obviously don't eat that. Is it a much smaller?
Yeah, why don't we go take a look? I'll show you. We have some right over here. This is the feed for the smallest fish here. You can take a little bit. It's called a number 0. It's very, very small. And kind of like a fine powder almost. That's the size they start on when they're very small. And that's about all they would get in one feeding there for that group of fish. Our water, because of what's been going on outside, is very cold right now, and so these guys, their metabolism is really slow, and they're not feeding super well. As you can see, they're not very excited about the feed right now.
And then with the circulation into the tank, will they eventually pick up all that food, or does it go down to the bottom and you have to clean it out?
Yeah, we clean these every morning. We try and feed them just the right amount to where they're eating it all, but if they don't eat it and it goes to the bottom, they don't really pick it up. We usually have to clean it up.
Okay.
Yeah. So we try to just feed them little bits and kind of keep an eye on how they're eating. And you can see they're picking at it, but they're just, our water was only 41 degrees this morning, so they're just not all that hungry.
Stick your hand in that and see how long you want to keep your hand in there.
Not
It's pretty
long.
cold.
Yeah, it's pretty cold.
Now, these will go from here to where?
Yeah, so they'll stay in here. So like they'll come out of the incubators, they'll go into here for about 2 to 3 months, and then they go outside into the big raceways. And then we have different screen sizes. We put the small screens in, and then as they grow, we put larger and larger screens in. And we do all the different operations we need to do, marking and grading and all those types of things.
With the screen, when you have the screens that are same size as the raceways, one of the things you do is you push the fish to one end. Does that also screen the smaller ones out?
No,
You're just moving them.
we're just moving them. Like when you saw when they're loading the fish there, we're just pushing them towards that pump because they don't want to go on their own. So we have to physically move them down to where we can pump them out.
Okay.
All the fish through feeding, they're all on a program. Even these fish are on a growth projection program. And so all the fish that are in the raceways together, we try and keep them all the same size. You do get some natural variation, but we try pretty hard to get them to be about the same size.
These, how many years until these will become broodstock fish?
Okay, so right now they're 0, basically. We will spawn them when they're 3 years old.
All right.
Yeah.
And then those were steelhead over there.
Yeah, the eggs you saw were steelhead, and we have 2 ponds of steelhead over there too.
With the steelhead, physically, what's the difference between steelhead, which are, some call it a salmon, some call it a trout,
Yeah.
and these fish, which are, these are diploid or triploid?
This particular tank is diploid because these are our future brood.
Okay.
A steelhead and a rainbow trout are the exact same species. So a steelhead is sort of just a different life stage of a rainbow trout. Rainbow trout and steelhead can actually, they can crossbreed. Steelhead just has a tendency to want to migrate.
All right. briefly explain, if you would, the difference between a diploid and a triploid trout.
Okay, so after we spawn our rainbow trout, we bring them in here, and we have, I wish I had it right here to show you, but we have a pressure chamber that can bring the pressure up to 10,000 pounds of pressure, and we put the eggs in there, and there's a certain recipe. During the proper stage of development, you pressurize the egg, and it basically interrupts their development, and they retain one more chromosome. So a regular rainbow trout would be a diploid, has 2 chromosomes. A triploid has 3. So it's still a male and it's still a female, but it lacks the ability to reproduce.
My understanding is with the triploids, what happens is that they grow bigger and faster because they don't have to generate the gonads for reproduction.
Yeah, I think that it's mostly true with the females. The males, they do actually sexually mature, the male triploids. And so they do put a bit of growth, a bit of energy into those secondary sexual characteristics, but the females never produce eggs and they never really change. So yeah, I think like a normal diploid trout, when they start hitting about 2 years of age, they're going to probably start sexually maturing and their growth is going to slow. Whereas a triploid, their growth will just carry on right through that stage.
One of the things that I've noticed over the years, and I've seen it more and more, is some of the trout that I'm catching actually have the adipose fin, that little tiny fin, right forward of the tail fin, the caudal fin. They have that flipped off. Why do they do that?
Yeah, so we actually mark 100% of the rainbow trout and the steelhead that we have here. And it's just a way for people to identify the fact that that fish came from a hatchery, and you can tell the difference between a hatchery fish and a wild fish by the absence of its adipose fin.
All right. Now these, the trout, they will go, these will virtually all stay together, will they not? This group right here.
Yeah. So this group, they'll remain separate from the other fish throughout their entire life. So yeah, we'll take these, put them in a pond outside, and then when they're 2 years old, they get moved, and when they're 3 years old, they get moved, and then they get spawned as a 3-year-old, and then at that time, we truck them all out of here after spawning.
Now, one of the things that I've seen with spawning of steelhead is that with the females, they'll use a pneumatic tube and they just inject it into the body cavity and it shoots the eggs out. And then they try to maintain them, allow them to live, and put them back in the river. With the males, they only use a very few of those to do the spawning, and then they kill the males because the males have a bad habit of getting back into the river and wanting to spawn with the wild fish, which is just not the best thing that can be happening. So with the diploid brooders, what happens with them after you spawn them?
Well, we release them all.
Okay.
So for spawning, we anesthetize them. We put them to sleep, and then we use that same pneumatic air needle on the females, which gently pushes the eggs out, and then we put them back in the water and they wake up. The males, we put them to sleep, and then we hand strip the milk out, and then we bring everything in here and we combine it and do our fertilization in here. So once they've been spawned, we hold on to them for a little while because there's a withdrawal period for the anesthetic, and then we release them to the anglers. And the anglers get pretty excited about catching them because they're between 7 and 10 pounds.
Yeah, most of those brood stock that I've seen, they're only about like that. But that's between the eyes, and that's a good thing. So, what else you want to show us? Where do we go from here?
Well, let's go outside.
Okay. What are we going to go look at now? Because we saw the babies, if you want to call them that in there, and then they grow. They get fed that little tiny feed that you showed us, and then do they come outside? When they come outside, do you have any problems with herons or animals or ducks or anything getting in here and taking any of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Yeah, so from in there, they come out here, and then we'll release some at about 6 months of age, and then we release some at 1 year, 2 years, and 3 years. And yeah, we do have some predation. We get a few mink, a few otter, osprey, heron, and kingfisher. One way we mitigate that is we have some hot wire fencing that helps keep the otters from coming out of the river and getting into the ponds. And then recently we installed lights and one of those blow-up inflatable men that you see at the at like a car lot. He comes on at night and the lights shine on him, and that seems to help keep away a lot of the predators.
That's a really good idea. I hadn't seen or heard about that one. That's a marvelous idea.
Yeah.
That probably takes care of the mammals as well. Well, birds not so much at night.
Well, the herons actually, we mostly see them at night. Yeah, so it does help with the herons.
There's enough artificial light around here for them to navigate.
It must be. Yeah.
Let's go take a look at them.
We're gonna go look at some 1-year-old rainbow trout. So they about 1 year after they were put in those troughs inside, we'll go see what size they are.
That looks like a pretty good spot to wet a line if you wanted to do that, but somebody'd get upset. You know how they get about running off with their fish. These fish are the same ones that we were looking at, but they're a year later.
Yeah.
The ones that we were looking at in the other building. Now they come out here and you raise them, but at this point in time, you segregate some of them out to be used as the brood trout. There's no reason to feed all of them. So once they've been segregated and you have what you need for brood trout and probably a little bit extra, then these fish, what happens to them?
Yeah, so you're right. We have extra fish, and then we select out the ones that we want to use for brood trout. We kind of try and take the best of the best, so to speak. And then, so they've already been moved down there, and the rest of these fish are going to get trucked out to various water bodies for anglers to catch.
Okay. All right. Now, these will just remain in the raceways and be fed, and the next size those are called trophy size.
Trophy trout.
When you're seeing them in the ODFW information for stocking. So those are the trophy trout, and what I saw, we'll go over there and take a look at them. They look to be about that size.
Yeah.
And then when you keep them another year and raise them to brood trout size, and those look to be about like so. With those are 3 years old at the point in time that you spawn them?
Yeah, so the trophy trout and the brood are sort of two separate things. The trophy trout would be a triploid sterile trout that we stock at various water bodies, and currently we're raising about 45,000 of those. The brood is a much smaller number. We just keep what we need for spawning purposes and then release them after they're done spawning.
Okay. And with those trout, those just remain here on premises until you've successfully completed the spawning. Do you keep some kind of in reserve too? I mean, in case there was a disease problem or something like that. Do you have an excess or an overage that's kind of your escape plan?
Yeah, so basically from the very beginning we do keep some excess, and then each year we sort of whittle a little bit of that down. And then even when they're 3 years old and we spawn them, typically we have more fish than we need to spawn. And so not every fish will get spawned. But yeah, we always keep some reserved just in case of a catastrophe or something like that.
What are some of the things that would cause a catastrophe with the brooders? Because that would be a catastrophe if you lost them.
Yeah. Well, disease is always something that could happen, or something environmental. We get some really high water events sometimes, and it could possibly clog up our water supply. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and so we have alarms on all of our systems. If we get a water alarm, we're out there no matter what time. But during high water events, sometimes we'll spend all night keeping that intake clean, because if it clogs up, all the fish on the station will die.
Yep, I've had to do that at the Hatchery when we have a flood, because if the intake gets plugged, then now is this pump fed or is it gravity fed?
Yeah, it's 100% gravity fed. We have an intake about a quarter mile up the stream there, and all this water is gravity fed, and then when we're cleaning ponds, it goes into a settling pond, which is across the street, and during normal operations, it's going back into Roaring River.
Okay, outstanding. Beautiful. And one of the things I'd like to point out to people as we walk around, take a look at how well maintained this is. You hear me talk about the people that care all about the park out at the lake. You see the same thing going on here. It's great to see people taking care of these fish, doing their job in the very best way that you can. But when you see the grass, you see there's nothing laying around, everything's well policed and maintained. They care. Let's go take a look at some of the big boys.
Sounds good.
As you can see, these are the trophy size. So they look to be about like that. How many pounds are these?
So these fish we call them 0.6 fish per pound, so they're about 1.5 pounds each right now.
Yeah, that's, and one of the things I want to encourage you to do is keep feeding those.
Yeah.
Now, do they stock some of these at Hague Lake?
Yeah, so actually 1,000 of these size fish are going to Hague Lake tomorrow.
All right. Yeah. One of the really bad things is, though, that this gets aired when? 26. So it's, the information's a little old when you get it. So just look at that. I mean, those are beautiful, beautiful fish, beautiful fish. These will be kept for another year, and then they'll be segregated out where you take the best of the best for the brood stock. And when they get over to the brood side, they're that size.
Yeah.
And then after they've been spawned once, did you say that they do use the brooders again occasionally?
We don't hear anymore. So once the fish reach 3 years old, we spawn them, and then we release all of those fish. In the past, we used to keep the females, and we'd spawn them again as 4-year-olds, and even sometimes as 5-year-olds.
Okay.
But that's a practice we don't do anymore.
Yeah, because they're kind of expensive. You know, they don't eat all that much at this size, but at that size and that size and that size, they eat a whole lot.
They eat a lot.
They eat a whole lot. So, anything more you need to tell us about these fish?
No, I don't think so. I don't know if we mentioned they were 2 years old. So this is about the size that you'll see as a 2-year-old trout.
All right, I'll give one more little shot.
Yeah, it looks like they're hungry too.
Is that the fish clipping trailer over there?
Yeah, that's what we use when we mentioned that you take off the adipose fin. So when the fish are about this big, the trailer moves around the facility. We bring the fish into the trailer, we anesthetize them, and then there's a crew of people with scissors that are removing each fin individually.
And that fin, when they're doing it, it's just about that big, so you got to be very careful. That's why sometimes with the steelhead too, when you get one that's a fin clip healed, but it's only partially clipped, so that can be a problem. You got to be very careful of that. Sometimes they like to write tickets if they're just barely clipped. You got to be very careful about that part. Let's go take a look at the brooders.
Yeah, sounds good.
These are the brood fish. All right. Now, would all of these be used more than likely in the spawning process?
Yeah, so These fish will be spawned starting this October, the end of October. We'll go in and we'll sort them out. We'll at that time we'll be able to tell the males from the females, so we'll separate them. And then each week we'll go through all the females and we'll look for the ones that are right. And we'll start spawning the right females each week. And then we have a certain amount of eggs that we need to produce to supply hatcheries with and ourselves with. And once we meet that goal, we'll take a few extra and then we'll be done spawning. So not every fish will probably get spawned. We'll spawn up until the point where we don't need any more eggs.
These, I think, are different from steelhead. With steelhead, they use kind of a matrix. Big ones, small ones, fat ones, skinny ones, mix the characteristics. With these, it's, I think, you're going to tell me, it's kind of like cattle. They look for a specific characteristic set, and then they replicate that for the fish that they produce. Is that the way it is?
Yeah, that's kind of it. These fish are used for put and take fisheries, and like we mentioned earlier, most all the fish we stock are sterile. So what we're looking for is a nice uniform fish. We want females that produce a lot of eggs, and we want fish that grow fast and are willing biters. And so yeah, we're kind of looking for a certain characteristic in our fish. And when I say put and take fishery, it means we put the fish out into the water bodies, and the goal is for anglers to catch those fish. We're not really interested that we're not trying to rebuild populations or even necessarily have them survive more than 1 year unless they're going to grow in a water body where they're not going to escape.
All right. With these fish, when you spawn them, do you use all of the eggs out of each female, or do you just use like a sampling from each one?
That's a good question. So, like I mentioned before, most of our production here is sterile. So what we do is when we're in there taking eggs, we take a little bit out of each female that is a nice female that produced a lot of eggs, and we set those aside. And those are going to be our brood eggs. And so we treat the brood eggs different than the production eggs because the sterile fish, the genetics aren't as important because they're not going to be passing those on. So we try and take the best genetics to produce our new fish for each year. And then the fish that are raised that are going to be triploid, we use all the remaining eggs from all the females.
All right. That's those are mighty pretty fish there. I saved some of these, got a handful of it here. I'll see if I can sucker some over to the cameraman. We walked down here to take a look at the bottom end of the process. The reason I say the bottom end is about a quarter mile upstream, the water comes out of the creek and it feeds by gravity into the hatchery. And because water is at such a premium for raising fish, they use every lick of it they can as many times as they can. And you've seen when we went down through the facility, all of that water is reused in the pens time and time and time again, and then it goes out past here into a settling pond and eventually goes back into the river. Now, one of the problems that we have is that we lose a lot of oxygen in the water when the water level gets warm and gets low in the summer. So how do you get around that when the oxygen levels get low or the river level gets low? They're kind of a part of each other.
Fortunately here, our water temperature ranges from about 39 degrees in the winter and only gets to about 62 degrees in the summer. So the available water is high in oxygen, but we just don't have a lot of water. So once it goes from one raceway into another raceway, we make sure that it has a place to spill, and it picks up some of that oxygen again as the water spills from one raceway to the next.
Okay.
So, and we also we monitor the dissolved oxygen, and we keep the fish densities low enough that they can survive with a limited amount of water.
And a good number of the personnel here at the facility live on site or very close by, right? Do you have alarms and things like that that let you know if things are getting out of whack?
Yeah, so we have 4 full-time employees, and every pond, every incubator, and every trough inside the hatch house has a low water alarm on it. So if there's anything that happens, even if just one incubator plugs up, it sets off an alarm, and we have radios at our house, and it'll actually dial our cell phones too. But someone is always here 24 hours a day to respond to it.
When you have a problem, it's great having the folks here on site to be able to react to it very quickly. And virtually none of this is pump operated, is that correct?
Yeah, so everything you see here outside is all gravity flow, and mostly everything in the hatch house is gravity flow. We do have some pumps that we can use, but they're mostly used to send water through a sand filter to give us nice clean water for the incubators.
Okay.
But if that was to fail, we still have the gravity flow option, so we have backup.
I'm reading my notes here because there were some questions I was asked to ask. How many fish do you raise here approximately each year for release?
So as we kind of went through the process, you could see that we have the very small fish and then the fish that are going out this year. So there's a bit of an overlap. So currently we have about 1.3 million fish here on station. And then each year we release just under 500,000 rainbow trout, or about 165,000 pounds. And in total, we release about 230,000 fish and about 220,000 pounds.
And you've seen how we load them into the truck here. When you take them, how far afield do you take them?
So yeah, that's a good question. We try to be efficient. There's 33 hatcheries in the state, so we try to put fish in the water bodies that are closest to the individual hatcheries. And we actually send eggs to about 7 different hatcheries. So rainbow trout get stocked that originated from here from 7 different hatcheries. Or even more hatcheries than that, actually. We ship eggs to 7. But the furthest from here would probably be Trojan Pond, which is just outside of Rainier, Oregon. But like I said, we try to keep it somewhat local to the hatcheries where they're raised to cut down on trucking costs.
One of the things that I've been involved with for many, many years is the Egg to Fry program for the classrooms. And I don't think that program's going on this year because of the COVID situation. But if it is, I know it's dramatically curtailed. But are any of those coming from this hatchery?
Yeah, we participate in that, and you're right. This year, several of the teachers that normally get eggs didn't get eggs this year. But yeah, we supply eggs to the lower, middle, and upper Willamette area, kind of. So we do participate in the STEP program.
Very good. I want to thank you very, very much for your time, and it's just unfortunate that you have to live in this environment and make a living here. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in to Tackle Box Talks. Thanks to Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, Tyler, the manager here at the hatchery. Thank you to Mark Davis for taking us on a tour with Tyler today. What else you got to say today?
I want to promise you that some of the fish that you met today will show up in my boat for the next one of these. Tune in.
From all of us at Washington County Parks, recreate safely and have fun angling.